Hello?
Yes, George. Joe Lauria here.
Oh, thank God. Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Really sorry to pull this.
No problem. No problem. We got.
How are you?
We have like 20 minutes left.
Okay.
So,
okay.
You wanted to start saying something? I was going to ask you a question and hit it off, but if you want to start, you can.
Well, I'm on a somewhat tangential issue, but not really. What's your take on the assassination in Donetsk yesterday?
That's a very far field from where we are right now. What can I say? That I'm not sure what the repercussions are going to be in terms of how that war, what it means for the future of that war. But I don't think it's a surprising development.
No, I guess.
I want to ask you about something. Let's start this rather than talk about Ukraine. I want to know if you could take a class view of the Assange phenomenon, basically, WikiLeaks. What has it meant? It seems that rulers in Europe and the U.S. were quite spooked by Brexit, by Marine Le Pen, and certainly by the Sanders and Trump insurgencies in the 2016 election. There's a new article by Gareth Porter that has appeared on Truth Out, and we're going to republish it in Consortium, which shows that both the Center for American Progress, which is the Clinton think tank, and the American Enterprise Institute, which is a neocon institute, both wrote similar reports about the need to respond to this popular uprising. What role do you think that the ruling classes being spooked have to do with going after Julian Assange and stopping WikiLeaks? And how much has WikiLeaks, you think, contributed to this uprising or more awareness about people that are fed up with 30 years of neoliberal economic policies, etc.? But has WikiLeaks had a role as well?
Absolutely. It's at the very heart of this the popular uprisings, which have been going on now for a while. I mean, they preceded 2016 by a few years. I mean, there was the Occupy movement, and there was generally a feeling that somehow, people always suspected that their rulers were lying to them, but now there was documentary evidence. So we suddenly knew, here are the papers that the rulers are lying to us. And it was no longer as easy to befuddle the public as it was in the past. I mean, in the past you say, okay, well, yes, we lied, but we meant well, and look, I mean, we didn't have the right information, and we made a mistake here, we made a mistake there, but generally, we were on the right side of history, so don't judge us too harshly. And suddenly, what WikiLeaks did was present documentary material that shows that the rulers were, in fact, very malevolently inclined, and they knew very well what they were doing. And their rationale was extraordinarily pernicious. It had nothing to do with improving the lives of the people that they're supposed to represent, and it had certainly nothing to do with the lives of the purported beneficiaries of the rulers and their interventions. And so it had a dramatic impact with suddenly this massive documentary material that WikiLeaks has presented. And I think that what has happened since 2016 is that Julian Assange has started to become the poster boys for the ruling class attempt to crush any attempt of the public to get informed about what's going on and what is being done in their name. So to crush Julian Assange would mean to crush the public's thirst to know what the hell's going on.
So in other words, your answer is yes.
My answer is yes, in a long-winded way, yes.
But that's a very good point you made about how he confirms what people suspected. And that's very, very important. I mean, look at Hillary Clinton. When you look at the emails that were released, and I wrote a book about it, and Julian wrote the foreword, and as I'm reading these emails and writing about it, I'm saying, well, didn't we know this about Hillary Clinton before? Well, no, we suspected this about Hillary Clinton, a lot of it. We knew she was corrupt. We knew things were going on. But that's not the same as actually having the evidence, clearly. It's so much more important than to stay away from speculation and theories, but to have the actual evidence in the raw material. And that's why they got to get this guy, and they got to make an example of him. and why he's in the fix that he's in right now, and why they probably trumped up those sexual assault charges to begin with to try to stop him. The whole thing's been geared towards silencing him and trying to shut down WikiLeaks so that their secrets are kept and they can continue to fool the American people. But what's interesting is that the beginning, particularly with the diplomatic cables in Afghanistan and Iraqi releases, that there was far more interest in the mainstream media, at least in the US, probably in Europe as well, about what WikiLeaks had to say. They really couldn't say, well, we can't report this when it's out there. They had to deal with it. What do you think's changed there in the media?
Oh,
why did they do it then and not now?
Oh, I think the answer for that is very straightforward. It was one thing for Julian Assange to be publishing documents that were unflattering about the Bush administration. And although, much of the liberal media had supported the Bush administration's war in Afghanistan and Iraq, nonetheless, the documents could still be seen as a condemnation of Bush. And so by the time Julian was publishing them, much of the liberal intellectual elite had grown rather sour, certainly at least on the Iraq war. And so therefore they kind of welcomed this material. But what changed was 2016, because at that stage, the documents were damaging to Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton was the anointed one. Hillary Clinton was Obama's successor. It was a guarantor of a kind of liberal establishment rule in perpetuity in the United States and in Europe. And her spectacular failure, which was only in part due to the revelations from WikiLeaks, but that spectacular failure was a spectacular failure for the liberal political establishment. And they haven't got over that, and they are determined to punish Julian Assange for that. I mean, that is something that is unforgivable. They will never forget that loss of 2016. And that's why the situation for Julian is rather dire, because he's got the entire liberal political establishment against him, not to mention the kind of Republican conservative hawks who are all for murdering him 10 years ago.
The whole thing is soiled by this very shallow partisanship that is so strong in the US right now. Mm-hmm. So that you've got Trump himself saying in public, I love WikiLeaks.
Yes.
Would have been impossible for a Republican to have said during the Bush administration. And you've got Fox News even perhaps saying good things about WikiLeaks. And the Democratic media, like the Times and CNN and whatnot, hates his guts.
Yes.
And that's all very depressing to me, that they can't see that this man is not partisan American political person at all. That he made it clear that he opposed both Clinton and Trump for the presidency, and that he was going to be ready to publish anything he got from the Republicans that he was able to receive from them. He doesn't go out and get it himself. He didn't get anything. They got some Trump stuff. It was vetted. It had been published already. Stefania Marizzi says, who was working on that project with La Repubblica. So the idea that Assange would have received Republican emails and not published them while only publishing the Democratic, or that because he didn't get Republican, therefore he shouldn't have published the Democratic emails, is just beyond absurd. But we can't get above that partisanship, and I think this
right. And I think that's what is also quite sinister what's going on, because it's quite clear what the Mueller goal is. What Robert Mueller is going to do, he's already in part done that, is that he is going to link Julian Assange into this network of Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and WikiLeaks, whereby the information that was allegedly stolen by the Russians from the Democrats in order to secure the election of Donald Trump was done via Julian Assange. And that way, he is going to, at some point, allege, certainly he's already alleged it, but he may well indict Julian Assange of espionage and say, yes, he was a Russian agent seeking to secure Donald Trump's victory. And that's really the key ingredient of this Mueller probe.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, I was about to say that while it's partisanship for politicians and their media, but for the intelligence agencies, this is not a partisan issue. They got to stop him. That's why we have a Republican, then CIA Director Pompeo, making the ominous remarks he did about Assange, because he was stealing their documents and revealing Vault 7 to the world and other things he may have. So for them, it's not a partisan. That's a dead serious game there. The other politicians are just playing, and the public is getting from the media the politician. But that what you're raising now is quite chilling, because what could he get Assange on in terms of what he's published? Really nothing. Although it is in the Constitution that the government cannot stop a publisher beforehand from publishing something. No prior restraint. After publication, they could be liable to arrest. It's never happened.
Yes.
Not since the colonial days with John P. Zenga, that someone has been arrested for something they've published. But that is not necessarily against the Constitution. It's just never been done for obvious reasons. But that would be flimsy. But now you've raised a whole different
extremely flimsy. But there is such a thing as the Espionage. Yeah, yes. The Espionage Act, and I think that's what the aim is, to get him on the Espionage Act. And once you indict him, it's not that Mueller is ever going to bring him to trial. I mean, you know, he knows that this isn't going to happen. But you have now smeared him, and if they issue an indictment saying, "Oh, he was a Russian spy," then that's it. I mean, it's WikiLeaks is forever tainted by this.
But there's a difference. But there's a difference here from the last Mueller indictment of the 12 GRU agents, because he knew, Mueller's people knew, there's no damn way they were going to get their hands on these guys. They would never be arrested. They would never be extradited. There's no extradition treaty between Russia and the U.S. So they could have pretty much used that and said whatever they wanted in there. It's a political document, not a legal document. It'll never have to be proven. It'll never go to court. They don't have to show evidence. An indictment is not evidence. Doesn't need to show evidence, but that's been good enough for the media, of course. They've taken it as a conviction. But in Assange's cases, they may very well get their hands on him if the Ecuadorians eject him, and the British will turn him probably over to the U.S. There's no doubt about that. So he will go to a courtroom. They will have to prove espionage, which means they'll have to prove Russia started this whole thing, which they've never been able to do before they could give it to Assange. It's two things they have to prove. Russia did the hacking. Russia gave it to Assange. It's a different game now, isn't it?
It is a different game, which is why that even if they did get their hands on him, I suspect that the trial would be probably postponed ad infinitum. I mean, Mueller seems to be very good at postponing trials that he doesn't want to happen, in which case he could certainly die while he's awaiting trial.
Is that Mueller? Mueller would die?
Or they could just simply, you know, have the whole trial in camera. You know, in other words, nobody gets to see what's going on. These are highly classified information ever known to man. We can't possibly reveal anything that goes on in this courtroom to the public. And you know, you can just get a conviction without knowing anything about what happened during the trial.
It's called state secrets privilege in the U.S.
Yes.
They can go before the court and say, Your Honor, this is too sensitive classified information. We're going to have to go into your chambers. You have clearance. We'll show you the evidence. The judge comes out and says guilty, he's charged.
Exactly.
Jury will never, if there is a jury, never will see the evidence.
No, absolutely.
There never have been any evidence to prove a connection. So the public will never know if there was any connection between Russia and the DNC and Russia and WikiLeaks. But they'll get their man anyway. They'll get their man.
Right. And then, but the media will report it as if this has been proven. Now it's been proven, established by a U.S. court of law. You know, the highest standards of judicial probity were applied in this case, and the judge found that. I mean, look, you've seen what goes on with this Pfizer nonsense. I mean, all these years we've been told about these Pfizer courts. Well, these are the most scrupulous judges imaginable. You know, they were all appointed by Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court. I mean, they're a bunch of buffoons. I mean, they don't even have a hearing. I mean, you know, somebody passes them some piece of nonsense. They say, yeah, sure, you know, go ahead, go eavesdrop him, wiretap him, you know, look at all his computers and his emails. Fine, go ahead. Now let's go get a bite to eat.
That's pretty much it. It's a rubber stamp. There's no question about it. That's how the Pfizer court works. And unfortunately, you're absolutely right. These members of the corporate media in the U.S. who act like they're assets of intelligence agencies, whether they are or not, will in fact report it that way, that the court has found him guilty and he's going to go to jail and maybe worse. I mean, he's going to be put away. This is really why we're having this vigil, because we're talking about this possibility. What could anything in the public, anyone in the public can do to try to derail this process, which seems like a difficult thing to imagine, because if they want to get him that way, we've just laid out how they could get him without having to present a shred of evidence of Russia's guilt or Assange's.
Yes, yes. Well, they've pretty much pulled this off since 2016, when the first time that they made this allegation that the Russians are in the U.S. election, which was about the spring of 2016. It's now become an accepted dogma. I mean, just about everybody now believes, yes. I mean, even the Russian, the Republicans, the Democrats, even the Trump's own administration, who are, if their theory is correct, they owe their jobs to the Russians. And even so, even those members of the administration say, yes, the Russians stole the emails, yeah, and the Russians used Assange and so on. They interfered in election. It's just accepted without a shred of evidence. No evidence whatsoever of this. But it's just by dint of repetition, it becomes a universal truth. And it's a remarkable thing that people should believe something that is against their own interests. I mean, for these Republicans who are holding very big jobs that they weren't expecting to be holding 3 years ago, for them to go repeating that the Russians have waged this horrible, aggressive act against us and interfered in our sacrosanct election, and we hold these jobs because of that. I mean, you think, well, how about resigning then? I mean, if you really believe this nonsense, hand in your resignation because you owe this job to Vladimir Putin.
Well, precisely, and we know that that's not going to happen. They're not going to resign because they're lying that way for career reasons. It is career suicide in the U.S., in the media, politics, and academia to deny or question this Russiagate orthodoxy. There's no question about that. That's why they're saying it, because even though, we got the job because of Putin, but he did it. And it also is part of what we were saying before about the class aspect of this story, to blame Russia and Assange for the mess that the ruling people have made here over the last 30 years, to anger the population the way they have this kind of left and right insurgency in the U.S. and in Europe. And so it has to be blamed on someone else. Our democracy is being undermined by plutocrats for a long, long time in the U.S. It's the plutocratic class that has bought our democracy, has undermined our institutions. Obviously, the plutocratic-owned press will never be able to say that. So you got to find somebody to blame all this mess on, that people are so unhappy that the middle class is shrinking, that students are in debt, that this is a disaster waiting to explode here. So it has to be Russia and, of course, Assange.
That's it.
Without the press to challenge this, how is it going to be challenged?
Yeah, no, exactly. Because the media are owned by the giant corporations. They are the spokesman of the giant corporation. The giant corporation wouldn't be in the media business if there wasn't a very good reason for it. Their media present the message the giant corporations want presented, which is all of these things, as you say, the fact that this wealth is being extracted from the public at large into the pockets of the super rich, and this has been going on for a number of years. All of this, this dissatisfaction that has risen as a result of this, all of this can just be blamed on the Russians. There wouldn't be dissatisfaction if Vladimir Putin didn't tell Americans to be dissatisfied. Everyone would be perfectly happy with what's going on if only those terrible Russians weren't telling Americans that that there's something wrong with this situation.
Yeah, we wouldn't have racial divisions either. No. I mean, it's so absurd that I don't believe a lot of Americans actually do believe this. I think there are people in professional classes who need to believe it to continue their careers again and continue to believe this crap. But again, I also think that the corporate media, the corporations, are still driven by profit only, but it has a political aspect now because they've got to show that they have to maintain the system that's so beneficial to them, and it convinced the people who could cause them problems that it had to be an outside power that did it. So that's a political stance that they're taking, even if they're not inherently political. They're after corporate profits, and that's what their motive is. Same as Wall Street, but of course it spills over into politics all the time, whether that's to overthrow a government abroad because it's standing in the way of their profits, or a trade route, or whatever. But this is maniacal, what we're talking about. And it's what the worst part of it is, it's confined to the conversations like we're having or on media sites like my own or RT, which is why they conveniently blame Russian media, which is having Westerners like us on there to talk about the things we'd rather be talking about in Western media, but can't.
Exactly. And it's just driving them to fury. Because, just a few years ago, none of this was possible. It was not possible for somebody like you or me or Don or anybody to have a say in anything. We'd all just be listening to Chuck Todd and Anderson Cooper all day and every day. And that's something you get a voice. And of course, this is arising, this is causing enormous fury. And I tend to think that it's just a matter of time before RT is closed down.
I totally agree with you. Sputnik as well. I think they would do it tomorrow. They got to find some legal way or excuse to do it. If they do it openly now, they're shutting down a media, even if it's a Russian media site. It's difficult for them to do that, but I think they are finding.
Well, I think that the difficulty is not so much the legal thing, because I think they can always get around it. They're afraid of Russian retaliation, because the Russians have said, you shut down RT and Sputnik, we will close down Western media outlets in Russia.
Do they need them?
That really need them? A real problem.
They've been shutting down foreign posts and bureaus for the last 20 years, the corporate media. There's hardly any foreign anymore. It's only the wire services.
Exactly.
Do they really need them in Moscow? I don't even know if they need them there, because the story's coming out of Langley anyway about what's going on in Washington, not out of Moscow. Right. They're not asking what the Russian government's viewpoint is, except for one line at the bottom of the story. Well, Russia denies it. They don't need people in Russia. They're not reporting on Russia. They're reporting on what America thinks is going on in Russia, and that's right here in Washington where I am. So I don't know if that's going to stop them from shutting down RT, frankly.
Yeah.
They lose their bureau in Moscow. I mean, it's just like a vanity post for somebody to put on their CV. I was the Moscow bureau chief of the New York Times, so a guy who I happen to know very well.
Right.
So I had arguments because I worked with him. He was a colleague of mine, and when I was covering.
Right. That guy from The Guardian, Sean Walker, who's sort of a classic case. So he's always somehow reporting. He's always got the scoop, but he doesn't have the evidence of the scoop. So when he saw Russian tanks crossing the border into Ukraine, I wish I brought my camera with me so I could take a picture of the tanks crossing the Ukraine. Then the other day, during the World Cup, he overheard some Russians singing some Nazi songs. If only I, had my cell phone with me, I could have recorded the Russians singing these Nazi songs. I forgot my cell phone at home. So
that article could have been written from London and gotten it all from MI6. But the problem is they need the dateline. It has to say Moscow there.
Yes. And
there used to be this thing called toe tapping, that one of the Times reporters revealed that if the story had to have a Washington dateline, but the whole thing was reported out of New York, the guy would get on the Amtrak, go down to Washington, cross the platform, and come back up to New York. Then they got a Washington dateline. So maybe Putin will let them fly in and out so they can get their dateline, but they can't really.
That's what they do. And then, of course, they nail some poor kid like Jason Blair who's doing exactly
it's out of the Blair story that we learned that. That's right.
Yes.
Remember that. That's exactly right. I think it may have been Blair that revealed that when he got ticked off.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're in a big mess, George. Basically, what we're both saying here to sum it up.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
But things could happen. Nobody saw WikiLeaks coming, and we don't know what. There's lots of people out there who are not happy with what's going on, and there could be more leaks. And it's up to the whistleblowers, and there seem to be whistleblowers coming around all the time. And there's more and more ways technologically to get around encryption and the NSA and get the stuff out. So maybe not all is lost in terms of providing the public, but the public has to know about it. And when the mainstream stops reporting on that or spins it in the wrong way, this is the problem. That the public at large does not get what the.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is, we're doing this Unity for J, but we need more. What we really need is daily demonstrations outside the Ecuador embassy in London. 1,000, 10,000 people every day, because at that point it will become an embarrassment for the government. And then if it becomes a kind of a magnet for foreigners to come and also to pitch their tents outside the Ecuador embassy, Theresa May will have an awkward problem on her hands. At the moment, she can just glide by because, all right, so there are a couple of bobbies outside the embassy. No one's paying enough attention on it. If you can get a point at which it'll become an embarrassment for her, then there might be some movement. But unfortunately, we're not there yet.
If there were 10,000 people outside, I wonder if they would give permits for that demonstration. Number one, and number two, why do you think there's so little public response? There's no connection between this is in the public interest, what WikiLeaks is doing, and the public reacting to preserve what's in their interest. Why is there not that awareness, you think?
I think it's because, people don't know enough about it. I mean, I think that it's just not enough people know about it. He has been smeared constantly. I mean, the smearing has been going on since, well, the whole phony sex scandal was from 2010. There's been an unremitting smears that he has been the target of. I mean, everyone, people have now forgotten that from 2010 on, the media were reporting him regularly as, oh, he's the rapist. He's wanted in Sweden for rape. Over and over again. However many times you could correct them and say, no, there was nothing. He's not wanted. He's not, there's no criminal charges against him. The issue isn't rape, and so on. No one, the media kept reporting this. So this smearing has been going on for such a long time that it's a real task for us to overcome this.
Well, I know one fairly high-profile academic here in the U.S. who used to be a strong Julian Assange supporter and now says that he thinks that he had Republican emails and didn't publish them. He has no evidence for that. So people backing down out of fear. I really think there's a bunch of cowardice going on in the media, in academia, and elsewhere, where people will not stand up and say what's true and support this guy. And I mean, we're living in a tough time. If you're worried about your career, if you stand up and support.
Yes,
classified information that's being leaked and published, it's in our interest to know about. So, as Don, can you hear us?
I hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Why don't you join the conversation? Is the person, you're going to be interviewed by George now, right? You guys want to take over? I'll bow out. That's fine.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, Joe, it was very nice to meet you at last.
Same here, and I just want to say, thank you. Thank you very much.